A little boy named Jimmy, said Daddy, wanted a toy airplane for a Christmas present. Well, Jimmy wrote a letter to Santa Claus not long ago, and he wrote the following. Please, dear Santa Claus, give me a little toy airplane. For when I'm a big man I want to go up in the air in a real one. I'd love to fly, and so I'd like a little airplane which would fly around the room as I've seen them do in the store. The store at the second corner after you pass my house has one. It looks like a nice one, too. Wishing you a Merry Christmas, your loving friend Jimmy. And Santa has reserved the airplane for his little friend Jimmy, I've heard, concluded Daddy. A little girl named Peggy, said Daddy, wrote a letter to Santa Claus, and this is what she said. Dear Santa Claus, I would like a rag doll and a doll which says Mama and Papa, and can shut her eyes. I also want a book, and a set of paints, and please, dear Santa, bring my mother and Daddy a doggy to guard the house. I want a doggy too, but Mother and Daddy also want one, so we could all share one. Doggy. Your affectionate little friend, Peggy. P.S. Please give my love to your reindeer and a great deal of love for you, dear Santa Claus. Peggy. She put her letter down by the fireplace, and the next morning it was gone, for she had addressed it quite correctly to Mr. Santa Claus, by the fireplace. As he was on the lookout for letters such as these around Christmas time, of course, he got it safely. Illustration. If he couldn't reach a thing he'd climb on the table. Page 282 Now Santa Claus loves to get letters. His mail around Christmas time is tremendous. But the more he gets, the more he chuckles and laughs to himself. Oh, this is splendid, he says, as he opens letter after letter. Days went by and Peggy kept wondering what Santa Claus would bring her for Christmas. She thought of writing him again about the doggy, for her mother and Daddy would say so often. It would be a great protection if we only had a dog. This house is rather far away from the rest, and then we would be safe. Besides, a dog is such a companionable animal and the children would love him. Somehow, she didn't like to write again to Santa Claus, but just before bedtime each night, she would whisper up the chimney, please, dear Santa Claus, don't forget the doggy, and the doll, and the paint box, but by this time her mother had let her off, for she would have gone on talking and talking to Santa Claus. And if she had kept on talking and missing her sleep, she would have been too tired to enjoy Christmas Day when it came. At last it was Christmas Eve. Again Peggy called up the chimney, and she put her stocking first on one side and then the other. And by her stocking hung 4 smaller ones, for Peggy's little sisters and brothers. Good night, Santa Claus, Merry Christmas. My love to the reindeer, called Peggy for the last time. And the younger children called out too, Good night, Santa Claus, give our love to the reindeer. And off they all trotted to the land of dreams which they had to pass through before Christmas morning would come. The next morning, bright and early, Peggy and her sisters and brothers were up looking at their stockings. Such goodies as they found. Peggy got her rag doll, and a doll who could shut her eyes, and say, Mama, Papa. And she got a set of paints and a fine book. Her sisters and brothers got the presents they had asked for, and they had such fun over the oranges in their stockings. Several of them were covered with black soot which Santa had dropped coming down the chimney. They loved to think of how Santa Claus had picked out these very oranges himself. But when the first excitement was over, Peggy thought to herself, there is no doggy. But then she thought Santa Claus was not supposed to get her everything she asked for. So after brushing away a tear which had fallen, she began to laugh and play and say, Merry Christmas, over and over and over again, to her mother and Daddy, her sisters and brothers. But in a moment or two they all thought they heard a whimper outside the front door. I shall see what can be outside, said Peggy, with beating heart. She opened the door, and there stood a little white dog, shivering miserably in the cold. I have no home, the little dog's eyes seemed to say, and as Peggy held him closely to her she said, I know Santa Claus sent you here, and I wish you a Merry Christmas. And this is to be your home, doggy dear. Oh, I'm so proud, whispered little brown teddy bear. You're no more proud than I am, said a little white lamb. Please pinch me, so, and then I will say, ba ba ba. Ah, that will make someone happy. The toys were in Santa Claus's toy shop and they were getting very much excited. There were still some to be finished, in fact, there were many to be finished, but none of them were worried, for they knew perfectly well that Santa Claus never left any toys unfinished. That was the wonderful part of Santa Claus. He could be rushed and hurried, and he could be so busy that you wondered how it was possible for him to do so much, and you might think, if you didn't know, that some of those many things wouldn't be done. But the toys knew, for the tools which Santa used to make them with whispered to them many secrets. He may be busy, the tools always told the new toys, but he'll finish you and you'll go to the children on Christmas Day. How proud I will be, whispered the teddy bear once more, if I am put on a tree. They say that Santa hangs toys on Christmas trees. But then, I would be just as proud if I were put in a stocking. How I would love to peep my head out from the top of a stocking and see the children as they come downstairs early Christmas morning. In fact, I would be proud no matter where Santa put me, or how he gave me. It's a great big and wonderful pride to be a toy made by Santa Claus which is given to a child on Christmas Day. That is what we all feel, said the other toys. When Christmas Day comes all the little squirrels, said Daddy, meet near the largest tree, which they pick out for the occasion. Then there is a wild scramble up the tree for the branches, where the squirrels perch themselves, and finally the feast begins. After they have finished their scrumptious Christmas dinner they play tag, hide and seek, and many other games, which make the branches wave around as they jump from one tree to the other. Prizes are offered by the older squirrels for the sports and games which are played. The prizes are usually extraordinarily big nuts or very red apples. Sometimes, too, kind children just before Christmas put nuts in the trees where the squirrels can find them. That makes the squirrels very happy, and they call these nuts their Christmas gifts. Where is Santa's home? Asked Evelyn, for we must know where to write him. He lives way up north, answered Daddy, but any letter directed to Mr. Santa Claus, the chimney, will reach him, for he has special reindeer collecting his letters from the tops of chimneys several weeks before Christmas. You must put them on the hearth, and on the envelope you must put a speck of soot, for that is the stamp you use for the letters which go to Santa Claus land. I saw such a poor little boy today, began Daddy to Jack and Evelyn. He was looking in a shop window where there were loads of toys, and as he looked great, huge tears dropped from his eyes and trickled down his face. I spoke to him and asked him where he lived, and for a moment he couldn't speak, but between sobs he began to tell me of his life. He was very ragged and quite dirty. He told me his daddy had died in the summer and that a few months afterward his mother had married a horrid, cruel man who hated him and called him little nuisance. The stepfather didn't like to work, and as soon as he had used up his wife's savings he told the little boy he would have to beg or steal his food, for he wouldn't be bothered with him. The little boy said that he had always had a happy home, a good warm fire and plenty to eat when he came home from school, and he simply would not beg or steal. One night he came home, of course bringing nothing. His stepfather saw he could neither make him beg nor steal, so he forced him to leave the house. His mother was so afraid of his stepfather that she did not say a word. Now, he had been away from home for 2 weeks. He spent his nights with a little school friend, but he could not stay there much longer, as the boy's parents were so poor they could hardly keep their children. He dreaded the cold, but what he felt more than anything was that Santa Claus did not know where he was and that he would have no Christmas. Let's write Santa a letter right away, said Evelyn, and tell him about the little boy. What's his name, Daddy? His name is Harry Armstrong, and tell Santa to bring his presents here, for I've told him he can do odd chores for us and stay here for a while. So Evelyn wrote, Dear Santa, a poor little boy named Harry Armstrong is afraid he'll have no Christmas. So please, dear Santa, send him a warm suit, an overcoat, a sled, some skates and lots of candy. Your loving, Evelyn. Jack and Evelyn had just gone to bed when Daddy walked into their room with a note and a stamp of soot on it. Evelyn hurriedly opened it and read aloud, Dear Evelyn, I won't forget about Harry Armstrong on Christmas, and you were very dear to think of someone else who wanted a Christmas. Your friend, Santa Claus. Hurrah! Shouted Jack and Evelyn together. Oh, Mother, I had such a dream, said a little girl named Betty. I dreamt I saw Santa Claus in his shop. Oh, he was the most beautiful old man I ever saw in all my life, and oh, Mother, his eyes. How they laughed, and he was making, think, Mother, he was making a rag doll. The very sort of a doll I hope he will give me for Christmas, and he was smiling at the doll. And I saw the whole shop and all the toys, and everything. Oh, I hope Santa brings me a rag doll. Now the Dream King had sent this dream to Betty, and it was as real as a dream can be. But it was absolutely real that Santa Claus was making a rag doll and that rag doll was going to be found Christmas morning in Betty's stocking, for the Dream King had told Santa Claus it was what she wanted, and that was why Santa Claus had smiled so, because he knew how the dolly was going to please Betty. The brownies and gnomes thought it would be a fine scheme to make a snowman, said Daddy. Billy Brownie made his feet first of all, and so they made him on up until his head was all ready. Then, of course, he had to have a hat, and Peter Gnome made him a very handsome high one. We have forgotten something, said Billy Brownie. What? They all asked. A pipe for his mouth, said Billy. To be sure, said Peter Gnome. A snowman isn't a real snowman without a pipe. We'll make it right away. So they got some twigs and some wood, and with their little pen knives they all made pipes. The very best pipe of all was chosen for the snowman, while the other pipes they put around on the ground beside him. For, said Peter Gnome, he ought to have a little collection of pipes. He was the tallest snowman ever made and he looked so jolly and happy. He reached so far up that when it grew dark Mr. Moon came out and said, "What is it I see? A man who is almost tall enough to talk to me. What fun!" And how he grinned when he found out the man had been made of snow. Sharpy, the squirrel, with his friend Chappy were watching some children as they filled bags with candies and nuts. "We want to make a noise so they will notice us," said Sharpy. "Perhaps they won't like us," said Chappy. "And some don't enjoy noise. They look as if they liked it," shrieked Sharpy. "Listen to the children. I don't believe they will hear us." But then Chappy and Sharpy began to scamper over the porch, and as they shrieked at each other, sometimes as if they were scolding and sometimes as if they were laughing, the children shouted, "Oh, there are two squirrels." Sharpy and Chappy looked their very best, or tried to, standing on their hind legs and looking very sweet and cunning as they begged. Their little mouths were moving all the time as if they were quite ready. "We have quantities of nuts today," said the children, "as we're getting our Christmas presents ready. Isn't that fine? And I can assure you that Sharpy and Chappy thought it was fine, too, as they were given all the nuts they could eat." "Still the letters keep coming," chuckled Santa Claus. "And every year it seems to me as though I received a larger mail than I ever had before. But it can never be too large for Santa Claus. And the precious dears. What memories they have. They know just what they want. They don't forget. They think old Santa remembers too when they have told him one thing and then just add a little postscript or another letter without explaining to him just what their last letter was about. They think he can remember and keep them all straight, even though he may get several letters from the same child in many, many cases. They think he can remember their names from year to year, and they're right. Yes, the blessed little dears are right." And Santa Claus chuckled to himself as he stroked his beard, and by the burning coals of the great stove in his workshop he read the letters which had just come. "Dear Santa Claus" was the beginning of every one, or at least almost every one, though some of them began, "Dear, dear Santa Claus," and "You precious old Santa Claus," and a number of other nice beginnings like that, which made Santa Claus very happy. But every letter made him happy, for every letter was just a little different and he liked all the children to be different and not to be just alike. "I hope you remember me," one read, "for I wrote to you last year and the year before that I was too young to write, but my brother wrote for me." Do you remember my brother's letter that he wrote that year? He said that he guessed the next year I could write you a letter, for I could then write my name. And my brother was right, and the next year I did write you a letter. Some of the spelling wasn't just like this, but this is the way it sounded as Santa Claus read it aloud. He was all by himself, except that his collie dog, Boy of the North, was sitting by him on the floor, but he read it aloud, for he loved to hear the sound of the words the children had written and picture them as they looked while writing. And he didn't care about the spelling. Of course, he said to himself, they must go to school and learn how to spell, for they would feel dreadfully when they grew up if they didn't know more than they do now. But when they're writing to Santa Claus it doesn't make so much difference. They can take a little holiday then. And even when they make a blot and then write down by it that it is a kiss, I know that they do mean to send a kiss to me, even if the blot itself was accidental. Well, I must go on with this letter. He went on with the letter, and this was what he read. My brother won a gold medal in school the other day. He is getting to be so smart, dear Santa, and I know you'll be pleased to hear it. You sent me a picture once, Santa, when I was very little, of a boy who was very cold on his way to school with his coat all wrapped up tight around him. In school he won the gold medal. It was the day they gave the prizes, and coming home from school the picture showed the boy with his coat open wide, and the gold medal pinned on, and he didn't feel the cold the least bit. Do you remember, Santa Claus? Brother was like that the other day. Yes, he remembered that picture and how pleased he was to think the boy, a boy he had always liked so much, had won a gold medal. And on he read the letters. Some were letters just full of news of what they all were doing in the different homes, of what they were going to do, and in some they wrote of the new sisters or brothers who had come since Santa Claus had last been written to. Of course they told him what presents they wanted, and they all said they hoped he wouldn't get too tired, and they all, every single one of them, told him how they loved him and wished him a Merry Christmas, too. And that made Santa Claus so very, very happy.